Hello, welcome to Malta, where I have had the privilege of being invited to talk to students at the University of Malta here near Valletta, courtesy of the Arts Council of Malta. I've done 3 workshops at this university on the subject of arts criticism, and also had a number of interesting meetings with artists and critics here. The question that's prevalent in a lot of people's minds is how you go about having a productive critical scene in an arts environment that's very small. The whole population of Malta is less than 500,000, and naturally any arts scene is small in any country, but it's still, even more so when you've got a small population. The problem goes in 2 directions. One is the question of theatre critics holding to account and keeping standards up the world of theatre, but also in the opposite direction, the world of theatre keeping to account and keeping standards up amongst theatre critics. The feeling among some artists is that some reviews are too nice and other reviews are sort of randomly and unpredictably biased in one direction or another according to the tastes or whims of the critic. So it isn't a question of wanting more favourable reviews, it's a question of wanting more informed reviews and reviews that are more sympathetic to what it is that the artists are trying to do in the first place. Set against that is a theatre scene in which funding is difficult, the opportunity to work professionally is very limited, and in a small community it can be sometimes hard to get a perspective on quality, both what's very, very good and what's very, very bad. The danger is that very, very easily people get a little bit cosy sometimes and start liking each other a little bit too much and being a little bit more friendly in their writing than they should be, keeping their vested interests and so on looked after, and on the other hand, when people have particular biases, they may end up just causing trouble and not having a very creative relationship with the world of theatre. I have a sort of feeling, talking to a lot of people, that sometimes critics aren't hard enough on shows that aren't good enough, and other times maybe they're too hard on shows that are pretty good. And the question there is how you get that perspective and how one side talks to the other in a way that is civil and productive. It's a fascinating conundrum, and one, I think, which has to be dealt with in a sort of mature, open way. And the more discussions there can be, like there was the other day at St. James Cavalier, which is a fantastic art centre here in Valletta, where there was a big crowd of 60 or so people and a panel of academics and artists and critics discussing the way forward, which I think is pretty positive. There are also great advantages of working in a small theatre community, because there can be a lot of interaction. There can be the possibility of people learning from each other, not feeling as though they're on 2 sides of the divide, and feeling as though that there are creative possibilities there. The opportunity that the internet in particular gives people is pretty great. It means that people can take control of the expression, can take control of criticism in a way that previously we would have been entirely dependent on a small number of publications. In the case of Malta, the Times of Malta is the go-to paper, just like the New York Times might be in New York, and that puts tremendous pressure on that one publication, and in many cases on one critic at one publication, to be the voice of everybody, which is obviously more than it would be reasonable for one critic to do. It seems to me that there's always a correlation between the world of theatre and the world of criticism. If you think of Kenneth Tynan in the 1950s and 60s, there was a tremendous theatrical scene that he was able to write about. There were 2 eras that were overlapping at the time that he was writing. There was the tradition of the great stage actor, the sort of John Gielguds, and he was able to write about all of those sort of grand actors. And he was also able to write about the new wave, the sense of the world changing, the theatrical world changing. So he was able to write about John Osborne, Samuel Beckett, Harold Pinter, all of these people coming through at the time that Kenneth Tynan was writing. Obviously, Tynan was a brilliant critic, but I don't think it is entirely coincidental that he was a brilliant critic at a brilliant time for theatre. He had something to respond to, something that was worthy of his talents. And I think the message from that is that a healthy theatre community can generate a healthy critical community, and the 2 things have a symbiotic relationship. And so it's all very well saying, oh, where are the great critics? And it's all very well saying, where is the great art? The 2 things do come
together.
And so the stronger your theatre scene, the stronger potential you have for interesting and provocative and creative and forward-moving theatre criticism. I have no solutions for any problems that might exist in Malta, except to say that the stronger the theatre scene is here, the more professional, the higher the standards, the more likely it is for critics to be able to set their own standards higher.
It's been fascinating being in Malta, talking to critics and to artists about the challenges that both sides face. And I think there's a great willingness here for things to develop and for the relationship to improve. And I think also particularly because of the possibility of the internet, there are more opportunities open for people to not wait to be asked, but to push ahead and to set up their own blog, set up their own writing, and not rely on the existing gatekeepers for their voices to be heard.